Captain Vex stood on the bridge of the Void Seeker, his forearms crossed in what he considered a rather dignified pose. The sleek research vessel hummed with satisfied efficiency as its tractor beam locked onto the pathetic human craft, drifting helplessly in the void. Oh, how the mighty had fallen, he mused. Well, not that humans were ever mighty to begin with. Target secured, Captain, announced Security Chief Thorne from his station, his massive frame barely fitting in the reinforced chair. The Chronari warrior's tusks gleamed under the bridge's blue lighting as he grinned. Their engines are completely dead. Weapons systems? What weapons systems? He let out a rumbling laugh that shook the deck plating. Science Officer Kira looked up from her sensor array, her large compound eyes reflecting the scanner displays. Fascinating, she clicked, her mandibles twitching with excitement. The vessel appears to be a standard human exploration craft. Primitive fusion drive, basic life support, absolutely no defensive capabilities worth mentioning. She paused, tilting her insectoid head. It's almost sad, really. Vex's purple skin rippled with amusement. 3 cycles of hunting expeditions, and humans never failed to disappoint. How many specimens aboard, Kira? 4 life signs detected, Captain. All appear to be in good health. She made a series of rapid clicks that passed for laughter among her species. Though I suspect that won't last long once we begin the experiments. Excellent, Vex purred, his secondary arms adjusting the controls with practiced ease. The Void Seeker was the pride of the Hegemony's research fleet, equipped with the finest torture. Sorry, scientific equipment credits goodbye. Thorne, prepare the containment chambers. I want our new guests comfortable for their stay. Thorne's laugh could have shattered glass. Oh, they will be very comfortable, Captain. Right up until they are not. His massive hands cracked knuckles that sounded like breaking bones. I have been looking forward to testing my new neural disruptors on human subjects. The human ship was pulled into the Void Seeker's cargo bay with all the ceremony of collecting space debris. Through the viewports, the alien crew watched as atmospheric processors sealed the bay and began flooding it with breathable air. How thoughtful of them, really. They wanted their specimens alive and conscious for as long as possible. Deploying capture teams now, Thorne reported, his voice carrying that special kind of anticipation usually reserved for birthdays and executions. Standard protocol, Captain. Stun first, drag later, ask questions never. Vex nodded approvingly. The Hegemony had perfected this process over countless raids, but humans were particularly prized specimens, not because they were special, mind you, but because they were so wonderfully average. Perfect test subjects. They screened at just the right frequency, broke at precisely predictable stress points, and had this delightful habit of begging for mercy in the most amusing ways. Any resistance from the humans? Kira asked, her sensors tracking the boarding party's progress through the captured vessel. Resistance? Thorne's voice crackled with static and mirth through the comm system. Captain, one of them is actually trying to hide under what appears to be a navigation console. Another seems to be attempting to send a distress signal with equipment that was outdated when your grandfather was still molting. The bridge crew erupted in various forms of alien laughter. Vex wiped a tear from one of his 6 eyes. Oh, humans, they never learn, do they? A distress signal? To whom? Their nearest colony is 17 light-years away, and their fastest ships would take decades to reach this position. He shook his head in mock sympathy. Poor, deluded creatures. Capture complete, Captain, Thorne announced with obvious satisfaction. 4 humans secured. 2 males, 2 females, all conscious and properly terrified. Bring them to Laboratory 7, Vex ordered, his mood brightening considerably. And Thorne? Make sure they get a good look at the dissection tables on the way. I do so enjoy that moment when understanding dawns in their primitive little eyes. As the boarding party made their way back to the ship with their cargo of human misery, Vex allowed himself a moment of pure contentment. The Hegemony's scientists would be pleased with this haul. Fresh specimens always yielded the best data, and humans had such wonderfully complex nervous systems to experiment with. Shall I begin preparing the testing protocols, Captain? Kira asked, already pulling up holographic displays of various torture devices. Sorry, scientific instruments. By all means, Vex replied, settling into his command chair with the satisfaction of a job well done. Start with the standard fear response tests. Then we will move on to pain threshold analysis, followed by psychological breaking point evaluation. He gazed out at the stars, feeling rather pleased with himself. Another successful hunt, another group of primitive aliens ready to contribute to the advancement of hegemony science. Life was good when you were at the top of the galactic food chain. Little did Captain Vex know he had just made the single worst mistake of his considerably long life. Laboratory 7 aboard the Void Seeker was a masterpiece of hegemony engineering, designed specifically for the systematic study of lesser species. 4 containment cells lined the far wall, each equipped with energy barriers that hummed with barely contained power. The transparent aluminum walls provided excellent visibility for observation, while the neural dampening fields ensured that any psychic species would find themselves disappointingly ordinary. Captain Vex stood before the cells with the satisfied air of a collector admiring his latest acquisitions. The 4 humans huddled in their individual chambers, and oh, what a delightful variety they presented. In the first cell, Dr. Emma Cross paced frantically, her graying hair disheveled and her lab coat torn. She pressed her hands against the barrier, shouting at her captors with impressive vocabulary. You cannot do this. We are sentient beings with rights under the Galactic Accords. Her voice cracked with desperation. Please, I have children. They need me. Vex chuckled, his purple skin rippling with amusement. Rights under Galactic Accords, he repeated mockingly to Kira, as if humans had any standing in civilized space. The second cell contained engineer Tom Pike, a burly man with calloused hands who had apparently decided that brute force might succeed where diplomacy had failed. He threw himself repeatedly against the energy barrier, his face turning red with exertion. Each impact sent crackling electricity across his body, but still he persisted. Let us out, you freaks, he bellowed between attempts. When Earth finds out about this, Thorne mimicked in a high-pitched voice, they will send a strongly worded letter that will take decades to arrive. His tusks gleamed as he laughed at his own wit. The third cell held pilot Jazz Santos, a compact woman with short cropped hair who had taken a different approach entirely. She sat in the corner, knees drawn to her chest, rocking back and forth while mumbling what appeared to be prayers in several different languages. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "This is not happening. This is not happening. This is not happening." But it was the fourth cell that gave Vex pause. Marcus Vale sat perfectly still in the center of his containment chamber, legs crossed, hands resting calmly on his knees. He was an unremarkable human by most standards, average height, brown hair, wearing the simple blue jumpsuit of a civilian spacer. But there was something about his absolute stillness that seemed wrong. While his companions screamed, pleaded, and prayed, Marcus simply sat. His eyes were closed, his breathing steady, his expression completely neutral. He might have been meditating in a peaceful garden rather than imprisoned aboard an alien research vessel. This one appears to be catatonic, Kira observed, her compound eyes focusing on Marcus with scientific interest. Psychological breakdown from the trauma of capture, perhaps. Vex nodded thoughtfully. Or simply weak-minded. Some humans shut down when faced with superior intellect. He activated the cell's communication system. Human, you will respond when addressed by your betters. Marcus did not even twitch. Dr. Cross stopped her pacing to stare at her fellow prisoner. Marcus? Marcus, can you hear me? Please say something. Still nothing. Thorne stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across the cells. Perhaps he needs encouragement. He activated a neural prod, a device that sent waves of exquisite agony through organic nervous systems. The energy beam struck Marcus directly in the chest. Tom Pike screamed in sympathetic pain just watching. Jazz Santos whimpered and curled tighter into her corner. Dr. Cross pressed her hands to the barrier, shouting, "Stop it! You are torturing him!" But Marcus Vale sat motionless, the energy coursing through his body as if it were nothing more than a gentle breeze. His breathing remained steady, his expression unchanged, his eyes still closed. "Increase the intensity," Vex ordered, genuinely puzzled now. Thorne complied, cranking the neural prod to maximum setting. The beam struck Marcus again, bright enough to leave after images on watching retinas. The other humans cried out in horror, begging for mercy on his behalf. Marcus sat like a statue. "Impossible," Kira whispered, her mandibles clicking rapidly. That level of neural stimulation should have him convulsing on the floor. Even Chronari warriors would be screaming by now. "Maybe his nervous system is damaged," Thorne suggested, though he sounded less certain than usual. Vex studied the silent human with growing interest. In 3 cycles of specimen collection, he had never encountered a reaction quite like this. Most humans broke within minutes of capture. Even the strongest lasted no more than a few hours before begging for death. But this Marcus Vale seemed utterly unaffected by their most sophisticated torture techniques. "Run a full biological scan," he ordered. "I want to know exactly what makes this one different." As Kira activated the medical sensors, bathing Marcus in scanning beams that mapped every cell in his body, the human finally moved. It was the slightest of movements, barely perceptible. The corner of his mouth twitched upward, just for a moment, before returning to its neutral expression. Vex caught the motion and felt an unusual sensation crawl up his spine. Was that a smile? "Scans show normal human physiology, Captain," Kira reported. "Brain activity is actually quite high. He is not catatonic or unconscious. He is simply choosing not to respond." The word choosing hung in the air like a challenge. Choosing implied control, and control implied. What exactly? Vex stared at the motionless human, a tiny seed of unease beginning to sprout in his chest. In all his years of hunting lesser species, silence had always meant defeat. But looking at Marcus Vale, sitting so perfectly still in his cell, Vex was beginning to suspect that this silence meant something else entirely. Something that made his skin ripple with the first traces of genuine concern. Day 3 aboard the Void Seeker, and Captain Vex was beginning to develop what humans might have called a headache. Not that he would ever admit to sharing anything with such primitive creatures, but the persistent throbbing behind his 6th eye was becoming rather difficult to ignore. The other human specimens were performing exactly as expected. Dr. Emma Cross had progressed through the standard stages of captivity with textbook precision. Day 1 had been defiance and threats. Day 2 brought bargaining and desperate pleas for her children. By day 3 she was curled in the corner of her cell, sobbing quietly and occasionally calling out for someone named Robert. Engineer Tom Pike had lasted slightly longer before his spirit snapped, but even he had reached the inevitable breaking point. His attempts to break free had grown weaker with each passing hour until he now sat slumped against the wall, staring at nothing with the hollow eyes of complete defeat. When Thorne brought food, Tom would mumble barely audible thank yous, as if gratitude might somehow improve his situation. Pilot Jazz Santos had stopped praying entirely and now spent her time drawing patterns on the cell floor with her fingernail, muttering to herself in what appeared to be a made-up language. Classic psychological fragmentation, exactly what the hegemony manuals predicted for prolonged stress exposure. But Marcus Vale? Marcus Vale sat in perfect silence day after day, like some sort of organic meditation statue. I have subjected him to neural disruption, sonic torture, sensory deprivation, sensory overload, temperature extremes, and chemical irritants, Thorne reported during the morning briefing, his tusks grinding with frustration. Yesterday I even tried the vegan mind probes. Nothing. He sits there like he is enjoying a pleasant afternoon in a park. Kira clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. His biological responses are fascinating, Captain. Heart rate remains steady at 68 beats per minute. Brain activity shows he is fully conscious and aware. Brain receptors are functioning normally. But he shows absolutely no behavioral response to any stimuli. Have you tried asking him nicely? Vex asked with heavy sarcasm. Actually, yes, Thorn admitted grudgingly. I offered him better food, promises of quick death, even threatened to harm the other specimens unless he spoke. He does not even blink. Vex studied the security footage from Laboratory 7 on his personal viewer. The other 3 humans were visible in various states of psychological collapse, but Marcus remained exactly as he had been since his capture. Cross-legged, hands on knees, eyes closed, breathing steady. If not for the occasional biological scan, one might think he had died and somehow remained upright. Run a deep tissue analysis, Vex ordered. Check for cybernetic implants, genetic modifications, anything that might explain this behavior. Already completed, Captain, Kira replied, bringing up a holographic display of Marcus's internal structure. Completely baseline human. No implants, no genetic anomalies, no unusual brain chemistry. He is, by all measurements, utterly ordinary. And that was what made it so unsettling. The communication console chimed, interrupting Vex's brooding. Captain, came the voice of Junior Science Officer Nix from the wreckage analysis bay, you might want to see what we found in the human ship's debris. Vex made his way to the lower decks, where teams had been systematically dissecting the captured human vessel. The ship itself was unremarkable, exactly the sort of primitive exploration craft the hegemony encountered regularly. But Nix, a young Zephyrian with nervous tentacles, was hovering over a data terminal with obvious agitation. What have you discovered? Vex asked, though part of him was beginning to suspect he did not want to know. The ship's communication logs, Captain, Nix replied, his tentacles writhing anxiously. They sent a message before we captured them. I initially dismissed it as a standard distress call, but the encryption is unusual. Unusual how? Nix's tentacles turned a darker shade of blue. It is not a distress call, sir. At least, not in the traditional sense. The message was transmitted on 17 different frequencies simultaneously, using quantum entanglement protocols I have never seen before. Vex felt that annoying headache intensify. What did the message say? That is the problem, Captain. Most of it is heavily encrypted, but there is one phrase that repeats throughout the transmission. Nix paused, his tentacles nearly black with worry. Black protocol activated. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, though none of them understood why. Pack protocol. Kira had joined them, her compound eyes reflecting the dim lighting of the analysis bay. What manner of human military designation is that? Unknown, Nix admitted. But sir, there is more. The quantum signatures indicate the message was not just sent to one location. It was broadcast to everywhere. Everywhere? Vex's voice carried a dangerous edge. Every inhabited system within a 50-light-year radius received this transmission simultaneously. The quantum entanglement network required for such a feat would be, Nix's tentacles trembled. It would be beyond anything in the hegemony archives. Vex stared at the data scrolling across the terminal, trying to process what he was hearing. Humans were primitive. Humans were weak. Humans were barely capable of faster-than-light travel, let alone galaxy-spanning quantum communication networks. There must be some mistake, he said finally, though the words felt hollow even to him. I have run the analysis 7 times, Captain, Nix replied quietly. The readings are accurate. A new voice crackled over the ship's communication system. Captain Vex to Laboratory 7 immediately. We have a situation. They rushed through the corridors, Vex's multiple hearts beating faster than he cared to admit. When they reached Laboratory 7, they found Thorn standing before the containment cells with an expression that could only be described as deeply troubled. What is the situation? Vex demanded. Thorn pointed at Marcus Vale's cell. He opened his eyes, Captain. Vex looked at the human specimen and felt something cold settle in his stomach. Marcus Vale was indeed looking at them now, his gaze moving slowly from one alien to another. His expression remained neutral, but there was something in those human eyes that had not been there before. Something that looked almost like patience, as if he had been waiting for something, and that something was finally about to arrive. The next 72 hours passed with the kind of mounting tension that made even seasoned hegemony officers check their weapons twice and glance over their shoulders at empty corridors. Captain Vex had ordered a complete analysis of the human ship's data banks, and what Kira discovered made his skin crawl in ways he had not experienced since his first molt. "Captain, you need to see this," Kira announced from her workstation, her mandibles clicking in rapid, agitated patterns. She had been working non-stop, her compound eyes bloodshot from staring at data streams for endless hours. "I have been decrypting the human ship's database, and what I found is disturbing." Vex approached her station with the careful gait of someone who suspected bad news was waiting. "More references to this pack protocol." "Much more than references, sir." Kira's voice carried a tremor that made Thorne look up from his security monitors. "I found personnel files, mission logs, and communication records dating back 3 standard years. Captain, these humans were not explorers." "What do you mean they were not explorers?" Vex demanded, though something in his gut already knew he would not like the answer. Kira brought up a holographic display showing decoded text files according to their records. "Dr. Emma Cross is not just a scientist. She is a xenobiologist specializing in alien physiology and psychological warfare." Engineer Tom Pike. "His real specialty is demolitions and sabotage." Pilot Jazz Santos has 17 confirmed kills in something called the Outer Rim conflicts. Thorne's tusks ground audibly. "And the silent one, Marcus Vale." Kira paused, her mandibles freezing mid-click. "Captain, his file is heavily encrypted, but what I managed to decode is concerning. He is listed as a psychological warfare specialist with the designation Hunter Class 7. "Hunter Class 7? Vex repeated, though the words felt wrong in his mouth. "What does that mean?" "Unknown, sir. But there are references throughout their communications to something they call pack dynamics. Apparently, when humans of certain classifications are captured or killed, it triggers an automatic response protocol." The bridge fell silent except for the constant hum of ship systems and the increasingly nervous clicking of Kira's mandibles. Vex stared at the decoded files, trying to process information that contradicted everything the hegemony knew about human capabilities. "Show me the communication logs," he ordered. Kira brought up a series of message transcripts, all heavily encrypted but slowly yielding to her decryption algorithms. "Most of these are routine status reports, but look at this exchange from 6 days ago." Text appeared in the hologram, translated into hegemony standard. "L to Command Base 7. Position confirmed. Local predator species has taken the bait. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2 of Operation Pack Hunt. To Command Base 7 to Vale. Acknowledged. Pack elements are moving into position. Remember, maintain character until activation signal. Good hunting." Vale to Command Base 7. Understood. The wolves are coming. Vex felt his primary heart skip a beat. "Bait? They were bait?" "It appears so, Captain," Kira whispered. "But bait for what?" Before anyone could answer, the ship's sensor array began emitting a low-priority alert tone. Junior Officer Nix's voice crackled through the communication system from the sensor bay. "Captain, we are detecting unusual readings on the long-range scanners." "What kind of readings?" Vex asked, though he was beginning to suspect he really did not want to know. "Ships, sir. Lots of ships. They are still beyond visual range, but the quantum signatures suggest a large fleet moving in our direction." Vex rushed to the bridge, his crew following close behind. The main display showed a tactical overview of local space, and what he saw there made his blood freeze in his veins. Dozens of contacts were approaching from multiple vectors, their signatures unlike anything in the hegemony database. "How many?" he demanded. 73 confirmed contacts, Captain," the sensor operator reported, his voice cracking with stress. "More appearing every few minutes. They are maintaining perfect formation and approaching at high speed." "Identification?" "Unknown ship type, sir. The design signatures do not match any known species in our databases." Thorne studied the tactical display with growing alarm. "Captain, if these are human vessels, they are far more advanced than anything in our intelligence reports. Some of these signatures are larger than hegemony battlecruisers." Vex stared at the approaching fleet, his mind racing. 73 ships? Humans barely had 73 ships in their entire pathetic navy, and most of those were barely space-worthy cargo haulers. Yet here was a fleet that dwarfed anything the hegemony could field on short notice. "Time to intercept?" he asked. "At current speed, approximately 18 hours, Captain." 18 hours. Vex looked around his bridge, noting the way his crew kept glancing at each other with barely concealed panic. The hegemony had built its reputation on being the apex predators of this galactic sector. They hunted lesser species for sport and profit, secure in their technological and military superiority. But if these were human ships, everything they believed about human capabilities was wrong. "Captain," Kira called from her station, "I am detecting more transmissions from the approaching fleet. Same quantum encryption as the original PAC protocol message. Can you decode them?" "Partially. The messages are brief, but they keep repeating the same phrase, 'The hunt begins.'" Vex felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. He looked toward Laboratory 7, where their human specimens waited in their cells, 3 of them broken and defeated, as expected. But one sitting in perfect silence, as if he was waiting for something, as if he knew something was coming. "I am going to speak with the specimens," Vex announced, trying to project more confidence than he felt. He'd continue monitoring the approaching fleet. He made his way to Laboratory 7, where the other humans continued their various forms of psychological collapse. Dr. Cross was now completely catatonic, staring at nothing. Tom Pike rocked back and forth, mumbling to himself. Jazz Santos had begun scratching symbols into the cell walls with her fingernails, leaving trails of blood. But Marcus Vale sat exactly as he had for days, perfectly still, perfectly calm. And then, for the first time since his capture, Marcus Vale opened his eyes, and not just opened them. He turned his head with deliberate slowness until his gaze met Captain Vex's across the laboratory. Those human eyes, so small and primitive compared to Vex's 6 optical organs, locked onto his with an intensity that made the alien captain take an involuntary step backward. Marcus Vale smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was not the broken grin of a defeated prisoner or the desperate expression of someone clinging to false hope. It was the smile of someone who had been playing a very long game, and who had just realized that all the pieces were finally in position. For the first time in his long career as a hunter of lesser species, Captain Vex began to suspect that he might actually be the prey. Hour 14. Captain Vex had stopped counting the minor system failures that plagued the Void Seeker, but his engineering crew had not. Chief Engineer Quill, a methodical Nexarian with 6 tentacles and an obsession with precise documentation, that had logged 47 separate malfunctions in the past 6 hours alone. "Captain, this is highly irregular," Quill reported, his voice carrying the particular strain that came from chasing problems that made no logical sense. Life support fluctuations on Deck 7, navigation computers resetting themselves every 37 minutes, and the quantum flux regulators are behaving as if someone is actively sabotaging them. Vex stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display that showed the human fleet steadily approaching. 16 hours now. The ships had maintained perfect formation throughout their journey, never deviating from their course, never attempting communication, never showing any sign that they even acknowledged the Void Seeker's existence. "Have you identified the source of these malfunctions?" Vex asked, though his attention was split between Quill's report and the increasingly disturbing readings from their perimeter sensors. "That is the problem, Captain. There is no source. The failures appear to be random, but they are happening with mathematical precision, almost as if they are following some sort of predetermined pattern." Before Vex could respond, the bridge lights flickered, casting dancing shadows across the command stations. The main display wavered for a moment, showing static before returning to normal. But in that brief moment of distortion, Vex could have sworn he saw something else on the screen. movement in the empty space around their ship. "Kira, run a full sensor sweep of our immediate vicinity," he ordered. "Already running continuous scans, Captain," Kira replied, her mandibles clicking with nervous energy. "That is the disturbing part. I am detecting movement patterns at the edge of our sensor range, but when I focus the scanners on those areas, there is nothing there." "Nothing there?" Thorne growled from his security station. "Your sensors do not detect movement patterns from nothing." "I am aware of that, Chief," Kira snapped, her compound eyes reflecting the stress they were all feeling. "But the readings are inconsistent. Brief contacts that disappear the moment we get a lock on them. It is as if something is deliberately staying just beyond our detection capabilities." Vex felt that familiar crawling sensation along his spine. In his years of hunting lesser species, he had developed excellent instincts for danger, and right now every one of those instincts was screaming at him to run. Unfortunately, running was becoming less of an option with each passing hour. "Sir," came a hesitant voice from the communication station, "I am receiving reports from Deck 12. Security Officer Rax has missed his last 2 check-ins." Thorne's tusks ground audibly. "Rax? He is one of my most reliable officers. Where was his last known position?" "Maintenance Corridor 7, near the environmental processing units." "Send a team to investigate," Vex ordered, though something in his gut told him they would not like what they found. 20 minutes later, the investigation team reported back with news that made everyone on the bridge distinctly uncomfortable. Security Officer Rax was nowhere to be found. His equipment was discovered neatly stacked in the maintenance corridor, including his weapon, his communication device, and his uniform. But of Rax himself there was no trace. "People do not simply vanish into thin air," Thorne declared, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Apparently they do on this ship," Vex muttered, studying the security footage from the maintenance corridor. The recordings showed Rax entering the area, conducting his routine patrol, and then nothing. One moment he was there, the next moment the corridor was empty, his gear remaining behind like some sort of bizarre offering. "Captain," Kira called urgently, "I am reading massive power fluctuations in Laboratory 7. Vex rushed through the corridors, noting how the ship's lighting seemed to flicker more frequently as they approached the holding area. The familiar hum of the Void Seeker's systems had developed an irregular rhythm, like a heartbeat with arrhythmia. When they reached Laboratory 7, Vex stopped dead in his tracks. The 3 broken human specimens were no longer broken. Dr. Emma Cross stood calmly in the center of her cell, her hands clasped behind her back, her earlier hysteria completely gone. She watched the aliens enter with the serene expression of someone enjoying a pleasant afternoon. Tom Pike had stopped his rocking and mumbling, instead sitting cross-legged in perfect mirror of Marcus Vale's position. Even Jazz Santos had abandoned her frantic scratching and blood drawings, now standing at attention like a soldier awaiting orders. But it was Marcus Vale who made Vex's skin crawl with genuine fear. The human was no longer simply sitting in meditation. He stood now, facing the energy barrier of his cell, his hands pressed against the translucent surface. And he was smiling. Not the brief, enigmatic expression from before, but a wide, genuinely pleased grin that showed far too many teeth. "Good evening, Captain Vex," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the cell's communication system. His first words in 5 days, and they were delivered with the casual friendliness of someone greeting an old acquaintance. Vex felt his multiple hearts skip beats in unison. You can speak." "Oh, I could always speak," Marcus replied, his smile never wavering. "I was simply waiting for the right time. And that time, Captain, has arrived." "The right time for what?" Vex demanded, though part of him did not want to know the answer. Marcus's smile grew wider, if such a thing were possible. "For you to meet my friends." As if summoned by his words, the ship's lights died completely, plunging Laboratory 7 into absolute darkness. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red emergency lighting that made the scene look like something from a nightmare. "Captain." Thorne's voice crackled through the communication system. "We have multiple hull breaches on decks 4 through 9. But, sir, The sensors show no impact damage, no weapons fire, nothing that could have caused these breaches. How do you get hull breaches from nothing? Vex shouted back. I do not know, sir. It is as if the hull is simply opening itself. Marcus Vale began to laugh, a sound that echoed through the laboratory with genuinely disturbing cheerfulness. Oh, Captain, you still do not understand, do you? Those are not hull breaches. Those are doors. Doors for what? Vex whispered, though his voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. Marcus's eyes reflected the red emergency lighting like mirrors, giving him an almost demonic appearance. For the pack, of course. Did you really think 4 humans would travel this far from home without proper escort? The ship shuddered, not from impact or explosion, but from something moving through its corridors. Something large and quiet and very, very purposeful. You see, Captain, Marcus continued conversationally, humans have this wonderful saying about never hunting alone. We are pack animals, after all. And when you capture members of a pack... Another shudder ran through the ship, followed by the distant sound of metal being torn apart. The rest of the pack comes looking for them. The main display on the bridge of the Void Seeker erupted in a cascade of warnings as Captain Vex stumbled back to his command station. What had been 73 approaching contacts was now over 200, and the numbers kept climbing. Ships materialized from hyperspace with the precision of a choreographed dance, each one taking position in a formation that spoke of military discipline beyond anything in the hegemony archives. Captain. Kira's voice cracked with panic as her scanner displays lit up like festival fireworks. The ship's signatures, they are not what we thought they were. What do you mean? Vex demanded, his 4 arms working frantically at his control console as systems failed around him. They are not exploration vessels or even military ships, sir. These are purpose-built hunter-killers. Stealth capability, advanced weaponry, and Captain, some of these ships are over 3 kilometers long. 3 kilometers. The Void Seeker was barely 400 meters from bow to stern, and it was considered a large vessel by hegemony standards. Vex stared at the tactical display, watching as the human fleet arranged itself in a perfect sphere around his ship. Not attacking, not demanding surrender, just waiting. Sir, we are receiving a transmission, the communications officer reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a human voice filled the command center. It was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its matter-of-fact delivery. Hegemony Vessel Void Seeker, this is Admiral Sarah Kane of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are currently surrounded by the combined forces of Battle Groups 7, 12, and 23. You have in your possession 4 human citizens, including one of our most valued assets. Vex found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak. This is Captain Vex of the Hegemony Research Division. These humans are legitimate specimens captured in neutral space under salvage protocols. A pause. Then, something that might have been laughter if it had not sounded so cold. Captain Vex, let me explain something to you about humans that your intelligence services apparently missed. We do not abandon our own. Ever. What you call specimens we call family. And you have just made the single worst decision of your considerably long life. The communication cut off, leaving the bridge in silence broken only by the increasingly frantic beeping of failing systems. Captain, Chief Engineer Quill's voice came through the internal comm. I am reading massive power drains throughout the ship. It is as if something is systematically shutting down our systems from the inside. From the inside? Vex repeated, though he suspected he already knew what was happening. Yes, sir. Navigation is offline, weapons are offline, life support is running on emergency power only. Whatever is doing this has complete access to our computer systems. Vex looked at his crew, noting the way they kept glancing toward Laboratory 7. The sounds from the lower decks had grown louder over the past hour. Not the sounds of combat or destruction, but something far worse. The sound of his crew members simply disappearing. How many? He asked Thorne quietly. 17 confirmed missing, Captain. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just empty corridors and abandoned posts. 17. Out of a crew of 63, 17 had simply vanished into the shadows of their own ship. Captain, Kira whispered, her compound eyes reflecting the red emergency lighting, I am detecting movement throughout the ship. Multiple contacts, but they do not register as any known life form. What do you mean they do not register? The bioscanners detect them, but they are not hegemony species, not human, not anything in our databases. It is as if they are something entirely new. Something new. Vex felt the last of his confidence drain away like water through a cracked hull. The hegemony had built its empire on the certainty that they were the apex predators of this galactic sector. They hunted other species because they were superior, more advanced, more dangerous than anything else among the stars. But if that was true, then what were these things moving through his ship like ghosts? The lights failed again, longer this time, and in the darkness Vex heard something that made his skin crawl. Footsteps. Measured, deliberate footsteps moving through the corridors outside the bridge, getting closer. When the emergency power restored illumination, Marcus Vale's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, broadcast to every deck, every corridor, and every hiding place where his remaining crew cowered in terror. Captain Vex, I think it is time we had a proper conversation. Please join me in Laboratory 7. And Captain? I suggest you hurry. My friends are getting impatient, and when they get impatient, they tend to get creative. Vex looked around his bridge, at the crew members who remained, at the tactical display showing hundreds of human ships surrounding them like hungry predators, yet the system failure warnings that now covered every available screen. He walked slowly through corridors that flickered between normal lighting and blood-red emergency illumination, past empty posts where his crew should have been standing, but he passed open doorways that led into rooms filled only with shadows and silence. Laboratory 7 looked exactly as he had left it, except for one crucial difference. The energy barriers on the containment cells were offline. Marcus Vale stood in the center of the laboratory, no longer imprisoned, no longer the specimen. The other three humans flanked him, their earlier terror replaced by expressions of cold, professional competence. Hello again, Captain, Marcus said pleasantly. Thank you for joining us. I know this must be a difficult time for you. Vex tried to speak, tried to summon some vestige of the authority and superiority that had defined his entire career, but the words would not come. Marcus tilted his head, studying the alien captain with the detached interest of a scientist examining a particularly fascinating specimen. You know, Captain, in all our years of studying your species, we have learned many interesting things. For instance, did you know that hegemony physiology is remarkably similar to that of Terran mammals? Same basic nervous system, same pain receptors, same psychological breaking points. What are you? Vex finally managed to whisper. Marcus smiled that terrible, patient smile. We are what you made us, Captain. You hunt our ships, capture our people, torture them for your amusement. You think you are the apex predators of this sector of space. He stepped closer, and Vex noticed for the first time that Marcus's eyes reflected light in a way that human eyes should not. But here is the thing about apex predators, Captain. There is always something higher up the food chain. Marcus Vale looked directly into Captain Vex's 6 eyes, his smile never wavering, and spoke a single word that would haunt the hegemony for generations to come. Run. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. And Captain Vex discovered that his legs were already carrying him toward the laboratory door before his mind had fully processed the command. Behind him, Marcus Vale's laughter echoed through the corridors of the Void Seeker, a sound that somehow managed to be both genuinely amused and absolutely terrifying. Vex stumbled through corridors that had become a maze of flickering lights and dancing shadows, his forearms grasping at walls for support as the ship shuddered around him. The sounds that filled the air were no longer the familiar hum of hegemony technology, but something else entirely. The whisper of movement in the darkness, the soft metallic clicks of equipment being efficiently dismantled, and underneath it all, the barely audible sound of his crew members calling out in languages he had never heard before. Bridge. He gasped into his communication device. All remaining crew to emergency stations. Prepare for immediate evacuation. Static answered him. The communication system, like so many others, had simply ceased to function. He reached the bridge to find it nearly empty of his command crew. Only Kira remained at her station, her compound eyes reflecting the chaotic light show of failing displays. Her mandibles clicked in rapid, panicked patterns as she worked frantically at controls that no longer responded to her commands. Captain. She called when she saw him. The humans, they are not just on our ship anymore. They are in our computers, our life support, our navigation systems. It is as if they have become part of the ship itself. Vex looked at the tactical display, which still somehow functioned despite everything else failing around them. The human fleet had moved closer, close enough now that he could make out individual ship designs. What he saw there defied everything the hegemony thought they knew about human technology. These were not the crude, primitive vessels described in intelligence reports. These were sleek predators built for one purpose: hunting. Weapons systems that made hegemony battleships look like children's toys, armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and propulsion systems that bent space around them like living things. "How many crew do we have left?" Vex asked quietly. Kira's mandibles froze mid-click. I do not know, Captain. The life support monitors show life signs throughout the ship, but when security teams are sent to investigate, they find empty corridors. The bioscanners detect our people, but our people are nowhere to be found. As if summoned by her words, Marcus Vale's voice filled the bridge once again, though he was nowhere to be seen. "Captain Vex, you seem distressed. I can understand that. Change is always difficult, especially when you suddenly realize that you are no longer the hunter." "What have you done to my crew?" Vex demanded, speaking to the empty air. "Done to them? Oh, Captain, I have not done anything to them. But my friends have been so looking forward to meeting them. You see, when you capture and torture members of a pack, the pack remembers. And when the pack comes to retrieve their stolen family, they bring along some very special companions." The main view screen flickered to life, showing internal security footage from various parts of the ship. What Vex saw there would fuel his nightmares for whatever remained of his life. His crew members were not dead. They were not even physically harmed. Instead, they stood in perfect formation in various corridors and chambers throughout the ship, their eyes reflecting light that should not have been there, their movements synchronized with mechanical precision. "You turned them," Vex whispered in horror. "We liberated them," Marcus corrected pleasantly, "from the burden of being apex predators in a universe where they were never quite apex enough." The bridge shuddered, not from weapon impacts or system failures, but from something docking with the Void Seeker. Through the viewports, Vex could see the sleek hull of a human ship pressed against his vessel like a parasite attaching to its host. "I believe my ride has arrived," Marcus announced. "But before I go, Captain, I think you deserve to understand exactly what you stumbled into when you decided to hunt humans." The laboratory's internal cameras activated, showing Marcus Vale standing exactly where Vex had left him. But he was no longer alone. The other 3 humans flanked him, but they had been joined by figures that made Vex's multiple hearts stop beating. They were human in basic shape, but that was where the similarity ended. Their skin held a metallic sheen that reflected light in impossible ways, their eyes glowed with soft bioluminescence, and when they moved, it was with the fluid grace of perfect predators. "Meet the pack, Captain," Marcus said, gesturing to his companions. "What humans become when we stop pretending to be the harmless little mammals you thought we were." One of the creatures looked directly into the camera, and Vex saw intelligence there that went far beyond anything he had ever encountered. Ancient intelligence, patient intelligence, and absolutely ruthless intelligence. "You see, the thing about pack hunters," Marcus continued conversationally, "is that we never travel alone. Every human ship, every human colony, every human family is connected to the pack. When you capture one of us, you capture all of us. When you hurt one of us, you declare war on all of us. The bridge lights died completely, leaving only the glow from the tactical display showing hundreds of human ships in perfect formation around the Void Seeker. The hegemony has spent so many years hunting lesser species, Marcus's voice continued in the darkness, that you forgot the most important rule of predation. Vex felt something cold touch his shoulder and turned to see Kira standing beside him. But her compound eyes now held that same impossible glow as the creatures on the screen. "Always make sure," she said in a voice that was no longer quite her own, "that you are not being hunted in return." The last thing Captain Vex saw before the darkness claimed him completely was Marcus Vale's smile, broadcast on every screen throughout the ship. It was the smile of something that had been playing a very long game, and had finally won. When the hegemony found the Void Seeker 3 days later, it was drifting empty in space, its crew nowhere to be found. The only message left behind was a single line of text, repeated on every computer system throughout the ship. The pack remembers. And in the deepest, darkest corners of hegemony space, that message began to spread.